The storm had already taken 2 horses and a man by the time night swallowed the plains. Snow came like vengeance, thick and blinding, erasing trail and prayer alike. The cowboy pressed forward on foot, his breath turning to ice as it left him. He carried nothing but a lantern, its flame trembling against the wind as if afraid to live. He hadn't spoken to another soul in 4 days. Hunger had quieted his voice, guilt had silenced his heart. Somewhere behind him lay a trail of broken fences, a past too heavy to drag, and somewhere ahead, he hoped, a roof, a fire, a reason to keep moving. He saw it then, a faint orange flicker in the distance, almost lost among the storm's white fury. The shape of a small cabin emerged through the veil of snow. His knees gave before his faith did. He stumbled the last few yards, boots sinking deep into drifts that clutched him like the hands of the dead. When he reached the door, he knocked once, weakly. The wind answered first. Then came the creak of a wooden latch and the slow opening of the door. She stood there, framed in the glow of firelight, a native woman, young but with eyes that had seen too much to belong to youth. The warmth behind her spilled into the cold like a promise. He opened his mouth to speak, but she beat him to it, her voice steady, calm as if addressing the storm itself. "You won't survive the cold out here." It wasn't pity nor warning, it was truth spoken by someone who had already buried her share of wanderers. For a moment, he thought of arguing, of pretending strength, but the world tilted and darkness pressed in. When he woke, he was on a rug near the fire, a coarse blanket over him, the scent of pine smoke and stew in the air. She moved quietly around him, tending the pot, her long braid trailing down her shoulder. The cabin was simple, a bed, a table, a shelf of worn tools, but clean, cared for. He pushed himself up, wincing at the ache in his bones. She glanced at him once, no surprise, no fear, only measured curiosity. "Eat," she said. "You look like a man who's been chased by ghosts." He obeyed. The stew burned his tongue but brought life back into his hands. He studied her in the flickering light. The lines of her face were soft yet strong, carved from endurance more than age. There was kindness there, yes, but also distance, a guarded stillness, as though she'd built walls made not of wood but silence. He cleared his throat. "Was riding north. Storm caught me wrong. Horse didn't make it." She nodded, neither comforted nor impressed. "You should rest. The wind's still cruel." He leaned closer to the fire, its warmth seeping into the hollow spaces of him. For the first time in weeks, he felt something close to safety. Yet under it lingered shame, an echo of things he'd done that had no right to rest near kindness. He caught her looking at him once, briefly, as if trying to place him in a story she'd heard before. Then she turned away, her shadow stretching long against the wall. Outside, the storm softened to a whisper. Inside, time slowed to the rhythm of the fire. After a while, he asked her name. "Names aren't for strangers," she said, without cruelty. He gave a small nod, accepting it. He was used to being a stranger, to others, to himself. Still, her voice settled somewhere deep in him, a sound warmer than the flames. Later, when she thought him asleep, she moved quietly about the room, placing dried herbs near the window, stoking the fire low. He watched through half-lidded eyes, not wanting to startle her. There was something in her movements, deliberate, precise, practiced through solitude. Every gesture said, "I have survived worse than this." The wind outside died down to a sigh. She sat by the door, her face turned toward the last faint howl of the storm. He wondered what she listened for, wolves, or memories. He spoke softly, not to startle her. "You live alone out here?" Her gaze stayed on the door. "Alone is safer." He wanted to ask why, but her tone ended the question before it began. Silence returned, full but not empty, like snow covering graves. He closed his eyes and drifted between warmth and dream, the scent of smoke curling through his thoughts. In that drifting, images rose unbidden, the rancher's emblem, the fire, the screams he couldn't forget. He turned, uneasy even in sleep. She noticed. Her eyes flicked to his neck, to the edge of a scar partly hidden beneath his collar. Her breath caught. Slowly, she rose and crossed the room. The lantern beside him flickered as if it knew the world had just changed. She knelt, fingers trembling as she reached for his hat lying beside him. The metal buckle caught the light, a silver emblem etched with a mark she would never forget. Her brother's last night had ended under that same sign. The room seemed to shrink around her heartbeat. Snow fell outside, muffling everything but memory. Her hand hovered over his throat, inches from the scar. Mercy, rage, grief, all warred within the span of one fragile breath. The fire cracked once, sending sparks upward like tiny spirits fleeing judgment. She drew back slowly, standing over him as he slept unaware, her eyes glistening with a truth she could no longer escape. The storm was gone, but another was waiting for dawn. The scream of a crow split the morning stillness, and with it, the cowboy woke. Cold air slid through the cabin like a ghost come to claim what the night had spared. The fire had burned to embers, pale and tired. For a moment, he forgot where he was, reaching for his gun before memory caught up with breath. Then came her voice, low, measured, and distant, from outside the door. "You're awake." He sat up, heart pounding, the blanket still heavy on his shoulders. The night's warmth was gone, replaced by a silence so sharp it felt alive. He rose, each step slow, as though the air itself were testing his right to move. Outside, she stood with her back to him, her long braid dark against the snow-bright world. The storm had cleared, leaving behind a light so pure it hurt to look at. "You didn't leave," he said quietly. Her answer came like frost, neither kind nor cruel, just true. "I wanted to see the man I saved." He joined her, the ground creaking under their boots. The valley stretched endless, white and gold beneath the early sun. He tried to thank her again, but the words fell flat, like coins dropped in deep water. Gratitude felt too small for what she'd done, and too heavy for what he'd hidden. "I owe you," he said. "You owe me nothing," she replied, though her eyes told another story. She studied his face as if tracing the ghosts hiding there. Then she looked to the horizon, where smoke still rose faintly from the woods far off. Her voice softened, almost breaking. "I used to live that way, running from winters, praying they'd forget my name. They never do." He followed her gaze. Something in her tone, in the quiet ache beneath it, drew the truth out of him like a splinter long buried. "I rode with Briggs once," he said. His name cut the air. He waited for her to flinch. She didn't. "I was a hired hand. We drove cattle, cleared land. We did worse. I thought I was earning a life worth something. Then one night we burned a village down. They said it was justice. It wasn't. I left the next morning and never looked back, except I've been looking ever since." Her jaw tightened. The faintest tremor passed through her hands. He didn't notice until she spoke. "I know that night." The words hit harder than the wind. She turned to him fully, her face no longer calm but cracked open by memory. "My brother tried to fight. They shot him before the fire reached the river. I was 13. I ran until my feet bled." Silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that grips the chest and refuses release. The world around them dimmed, the air thick with unsaid things. He dropped his gaze, shame flickering like the dying lantern light. "I didn't know." "You didn't want to," she said. He swallowed hard. The truth of it burned worse than the cold ever had. For years, he'd thought guilt was penance enough. But standing before her now, he understood guilt was just a shield to hide behind, not a wound to heal. She stepped closer, close enough that her breath brushed his cheek. "Tell me," she whispered, "if I'd left you out there last night, would that have made it right?" He met her eyes, and the weight of her mercy nearly broke him. "No," he said. "It would have made us both the same." A long pause settled between them, heavy and strange. Her eyes softened first. The anger didn't vanish, it folded into sorrow. "Then let the snow bury what it can," she said. "The rest, we carry." He nodded, the words sinking deep. For the first time in years, the cold didn't feel like punishment, it felt like something clean. They stood there together as the sun crept higher, light spilling over the cabin and the land beyond. Birds began to stir in the trees, cautious, uncertain of peace. He looked at her, really looked this time, not as a stranger or a savior, but as the only mirror left that showed who he had been and who he might still become. "You should know my name," he said finally. She shook her head gently. "Names change nothing." "Maybe not," he answered, "but they matter when it's time to forgive." The words hung between them, fragile and trembling. She closed her eyes, and a tear slipped down, freezing before it fell. Then she opened them again, the morning light caught in her lashes. Inside the cabin, the last ember gave a faint hiss and died. Outside, two figures stood against a world washed clean, bound not by love yet, not by hate anymore, but by the thin, trembling thread between them, truth. And as the wind rose again, soft and hollow, she whispered a single sentence he would remember for the rest of his life. "You won't survive the cold," she said, "unless you learn to keep your heart warm." The sun flared brighter then, gold spilling over the snow like forgiveness itself. Neither spoke again. The crow circled once above the valley, its cry cutting the air in two. He turned toward the horizon. She toward the cabin. And though they walked in different directions, each step carried the weight of something mended, not forgotten, something thawing. The morning held its breath. Somewhere deep beneath the frost, water began to move.